Hey, welcome back. This is week 4, the last episode of June, and I want to do something a little different today, like I do every last episode of every last month this year. I want to have a real conversation with you, not a lecture, not another framework, just you and me, talking about where you actually are after this month. Because here is what I know from doing this work. People can listen to every episode, take every note, understand every concept, and still do not move. And I don't want that for you. So, part 1 of today's episode is a coaching session. I'm going to talk to you just the way I talk to my coaching clients directly, honestly, and without a lot of padding. And part 2, I'm going to answer some questions that came from the community about this month's theme. Let's get started. Welcome to the Leading Yourself podcast. This is your host, Carolina de Arriba. I'm an HR professional, coach, wife, mom, and above all things, a goal-getter. In this podcast, we're going to be digging into all things leadership, professional and career development, habits, and relationships. This is a podcast for those who want to become the best version of themselves, those who have big dreams and are willing to embrace the journey and put in the work to achieve them. My goal is to share with you the tools, tips, and tricks to help you in your journey. So let's dig into today's episode. Okay, I want to start with a question, and I want you to actually answer it. Not the answer you would give in public, but the honest one. After 4 weeks of this series, after everything we talked about, where are you? Because I am going to guess it is one of a few places. Maybe you are the person who listened to every episode, felt every one of them, and has not done anything yet. The conversation is still there. The ask has not been made, and there is a small but persistent voice telling you that you're going to do it, just not today. Maybe you are the person who tried. You had the conversation and it did not go well. And now you're not sure whether the framework failed or you failed the framework, or whether having the conversation was at all a mistake. Or maybe, and this is one I want to spend some real time on today, you are the person who got through the whole month and realized that the conversation you have been most afraid to have is not with your partner or your manager or your best friend. It is with yourself. Let me talk to the person who has not moved yet, because I think that is more of you than any of us would admit. You are not stuck because you do not understand what to do. You understand it. The framework in week 3 probably gave you everything you need to actually go and do it. So let me ask you something different. What are you protecting by not having this conversation? Not what you are afraid of. We talked about that fear before. I am asking something a little bit harder. What is the benefit of staying where you are? Because here is the thing about avoidance that does not get said enough. It is usually, or it is always protecting something. Sometimes it is protecting the relationship or the image of the relationship. Sometimes it is protecting yourself from having to make a decision you're not ready to make. Sometimes it is protecting a story you have been telling about why things are the way they are, and having the conversation would mean that story is no longer available to you. The last one is a sneaky one. The story that says things would be different if my manager actually saw my value, or this friendship would be closer if she was a better communicator, or I would ask for the promotion, but they probably would not give it to me anyways. As long as you do not have the conversation, the story is safe. You do not have to find out whether it's true, but you also do not get to find out whether it is not. Here is what I want you to do. Not this week, today. Before this episode is over, name the one conversation you're still avoiding. You know which one it is. Write it down. the person, the thing, the one sentence, and then write down what are you protecting by not having it. Not what you're afraid of. What are you protecting? That answer is usually what the real work is. Now, let me talk about the person who had the conversation and it did not go the way that you hoped. First, I want to say something very clearly. Having a hard conversation that does not go perfectly, it is not a failure. It is a conversation doing what hard conversations do, which is surface the complexity of real relationships between real people who are both carrying things the other one does not fully know. So before you go anywhere else, you did the hard thing. That counts. But now I want to ask you to do something uncomfortable, which is to look honestly at what happened. Not to beat yourself up about it, to learn from it. Was the prep solid? Did you go in knowing the one thing you needed to say? Or did you go in with a pile of feelings and no clear anchor? And the conversation spiraled because there were too many things in the room at once. How did you open? Did you lead with the relationship or did you open with an apology or evidence or a frustration that had been building for months and came out harder than you meant it to? What happened in the delivery? Did you say the thing and hold it? Or did the other person react and you went into fix it mode? Softening, explaining, walking it back until the original point was completely buried. And what happened after? Did you close it? Or did you just kind of end with both of you a little shaking and no real sense of what had you agreed in the conversation? I am not asking these questions to make you feel bad. I am asking because one of those places is where the learning is. And knowing which one means you go into the next conversation better prepared, not more afraid. Because here is what I want you to hold into. One hard conversation that did not land perfectly is not evidence that you cannot do it. It is evidence that it is hard, which you already knew. The question is not whether to try again. The question is, what do you know that you did not know before? And now I want to spend the most time on the person who got through this whole month and realized, maybe quietly, maybe with some discomfort, that the conversation they have been most afraid to have is internal. With the part of themselves that knows they have been undervaluing their own time and saying yes to things that cost them. With the part that knows a relationship has run its course, but it's not ready to admit it. With a part that has been telling a story about why they're not ready, not visible enough, not experienced enough, not quite there yet. When the truth is they have been ready for a while and the story is safer than the risk. This is the conversation underneath the conversation. It is the hardest one of all, not because the other person might react badly, but because you cannot manage or prepare for a strategic frame, a conversation with yourself. You just have to be honest. Here is what I've learned about the internal conversation. It usually has one question at its center. And the question is not, what should I do? Most people know what they should do. The question is, am I willing to stop pretending I do not know? Because pretending not to know, it's its own kind of comfort. If I do not quite admit that I am unhappy in this role, I do not have to decide what to do about it. If I do not fully acknowledge that I have been playing small, I do not have to explain why. If I do not let myself see clearly that these relationships have been drawing me for 2 years, I do not have to face the grief of it. The internal conversation asks you to stop the pretending, to sit with what you actually know, to let it be true, even if it's inconvenient or painful or complicated. And from that honest place, not before it, you decide what you want to do. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it. What do you know that you have been pretending not to know about your own life right now? You do not have to answer that out loud. You do not have to share with anyone, but write it down somewhere private and let yourself actually know it. That is a conversation that makes all the other ones possible. Okay, let me bring this together before we move to the Q&A. 4 weeks, a lot of ground covered, and I want to give you 3 things to carry into the rest of the year. Not a framework, but as a way of living differently with this. First, make hard conversations a practice, not an event. The biggest mistake I see is people treating a difficult conversation like a crisis to be managed. Something that happens, takes enormous energy, and then it's over. And because it takes so much energy, they avoid it as long as possible. And the longer you avoid it, the bigger it gets. And the bigger it gets, the more energy it takes. It is a cycle. What breaks the cycle is making it a practice. Small, regular, and honest. Naming things early when they are smaller. Having the 2-minute conversation now instead the 40-minute conversation 3 months from now. The people who are good at hard conversations did not get good at them because they are braver than everyone else. They got good at them because they stopped letting things accumulate. Second, build your own self awareness about where you get stuck. Everyone has a pattern. Some people are great at the prep and fall apart in the delivery. Some people can say the thing but never follow up. Some people avoid the conversation until they are so frustrated that they have it wrong. Too much emotion, not enough clarity. Know your pattern because the framework is only as good as your ability to use it, and you can only use it well if you know where you personally tend to break down. And build in a check-in for yourself before any hard conversation. Which part of this I am most likely to get in my own way? That question alone changes how you prepare. The third thing, the conversation you keep avoiding is the one that matters most. I will leave you with this. In my experience, personal and professional, the conversation a person has been avoiding the longest is almost always the most important one. Not because avoiding it is wrong, because the length of the avoidance is usually proportional to how much the thing matters. We did not avoid the conversation that do not count. We avoid the ones that do. So, whatever you wrote down at the start of the month, the person, the thing, the sentence, I want you to look at it again. And I want you to ask yourself, what would be possible in my life if I had this conversation? Not what could go wrong, what could become possible? That is the question worth sitting with. Okay, it's time to move on to the second part of today and me answering some of the questions that came in from the community, and I want to give them real answers because I know that every question that comes in, you were not the only one who thought about it. You're not the only one who has the question, but many people listening might have the same question. So let's dig in. The first question, I'm going to read it as it came through. It says, I have the conversation in my head 100 times. I know exactly what I want to say, but when I am actually in the room, I freeze or I back down. How do I stop doing that? This is one of the most common things I hear, and I experience myself. And I want to name what is actually happening because I think the way most people try to fix it makes it even worse. When you rehearse a conversation in your head, you are rehearsing it in a controlled environment. You know what you are going to say, and you're also playing the other person. So you know what they are going to say too. You have full control. And it feels good. It feels like you are ready. But then you get into the room and the other person does not follow the script. They say something unexpected. Their face does something you did not anticipate. The energy in the room is different than the one in your head. And all of that information, the real life, unpredictable human in front of you, floods your nervous system and you freeze. So here's what I want you to try instead of rehearsing the script. Rehearse the anchor, not the conversation. The one sentence, the one thing you need to say. That is what you practice until it is completely solid. Not the whole conversation, just the one sentence said clearly without apology. Because here is what that does. When the conversation goes somewhere unexpected, you have not lost your whole map. You still have your anchor. You can come back to it. The second thing I want to say is this: the freeze, the backing down in the moment, is often a signal that something in the prep is not quite finished. Either the one thing is not actually as clear as you thought, or the fear has not been fully named, or you do not actually know what you want to happen. So when the moment comes, you have nothing to hold onto. Go back to the prep, not to rehearse more, but to get more clear with yourself. Thank you for that question. That was a really good question. And I'm sure many people listening is experiencing the same thing as you. So thank you for being the brave one who actually submit the question. The next question, it says, I finally asked for the promotion I have been waiting for. My manager said not yet and gave me some vague feedback about needing more visibility. I left the meeting feeling worse than before I asked. What do I do with that? Okay, a few things here. First, you ask. That is not nothing. That is the hardest part of most people, and you did it. So before you do anything else, I want you to hold into that. Now, the vague feedback, more visibility. It's one of those phrases that mean a lot in different ways, and when it is vague, it is almost never enough to act on. More visibility to whom? In what context? Doing what specifically? Those are not rhetorical questions. Those are the questions you need to go back and ask. Because here is what I know from the other side of the conversation, from the leader's chair. When someone gives vague developmental feedback, it is usually one of two things. Either they have not thought it through clearly themselves and they defaulted to something that sounded reasonable, or there is something more specific underneath that they were not sure how to say. Either way, your job now is to go back and get it specific, not to push back on the no, but to understand it. Schedule a follow up conversation and ask these exact questions. When you said more visibility, can you help me understand what does that look like concretely? Who specifically needs to see more of my work or know more about what I am doing? And what would it look like in 6 months if I had done that well? How would you know I was ready? That last question is one of the most important ones because it turns a vague feedback, a vague no, into a concrete roadmap. And it also tells you something about whether this leader is actually invested in your development or whether the no is really a different kind of answer. If they can answer it as specifically, great, you have a plan. If they cannot or will not, that is information. And it might be the most important thing you got from the whole conversation. And maybe it's not that intentionally that way. It's because they are struggling too with having the hard conversation, just like you do. We are all humans. Maybe you need to find help from another persona in your career squad to help you with that piece. Talking about the career squad, my new book, it's coming to life very soon. It's going to be published September 5th. It's called The 9 People You Need in Your Career Squad. And I know you're going to love it. So stay tuned because more is coming very soon. Okay, the next question. I know what conversation I need to have. I have known all month, but the person I need to have it with is my boss, and I'm generally scared of the professional consequences. How do I know if the risk is worth it? This is a real question, and I want to give you a real answer. Not just say that your voice matters and you should speak your truth, because yes, your voice matters, and also professional consequences are real. Power dynamics are real. And the advice to just be brave does not account for the fact that some work environments are not safe for certain kinds of honesty. So let me give you something more useful than that. Here is how I think about risk in a professional conversation with someone who has authority over you. First, what is the cost of not having the conversation? Not in an abstract way, but specifically. Is this a conversation about something that is unsustainable for you? Is staying silent costing you your engagement, your well being, your sense of your own value? Because sometimes the risk of speaking up is real, but the cost of staying quiet is higher. And you need to be honest about which one you are living with. Second, what kind of conversation is this really? There is a difference between a conversation when you're sharing feedback, making an ask, or naming a concern, and a conversation where you're challenging something your boss has done or said directly. The first category is usually safer than people think. The second category requires more careful reading of your environment. Third, what do you know about this specific person and this specific environment? Have others spoke up and been heard, or have others spoke up and faced consequences? That is not a reason to automatically stay quiet, but it is information that belongs in your risk assessment. And fourth, and this is one I think is most important, what are you actually asking for in this conversation? The more clear, the more constructive the ask, the lower the risk. I want to talk about how I get more visibility for the work I am doing is a very different conversation from I feel undervalued and I do not think that is fair. Same underlying truth, very different risk profile. The question of whether the risk is worth it is one only you can answer, but you can make a much better decision about it when you are clear about what you're actually risking and what you're risking by staying silent and what is specifically you need to say. If you do all of that thinking and you still decide now is not the right time, that is a legitimate choice. It is not you being coward. The goal is that the decision is made intentionally, not by avoidance. Okay, that's it. We came to the end of our series. 4 weeks, 4 conversations. The ones we avoid with the people we love, the asks we keep not making, the framework for when we are ready to actually have the conversation, and today, the honest look at where we still are. I want to say something before I let you go. This work is not linear. You are not going to listen to a month of episodes and suddenly be someone who breezes through the hard conversations. That is not how this works. You are going to prep and get into the room and still feel your heart beating. You are going to say the thing and wish you have not said it or that you had said it differently. You are going to try to follow up and the other person is not going to respond the way you hoped. All of that is going to happen and it's still worth doing because on the other side of the conversation you have been avoiding is a version of your life that has more honesty in it, more clarity, more of you in it, and relationships at work or at home or with friendships that are built on something real instead of the comfortable management of everything left unsaid. That is worth the discomfort every single time. Thank you for being here this month. Genuinely, this community means a lot to me, and I do not take lightly that you show up here week after week. If this series landed with you, share it. Share the episode that hit the most. Let it reach someone who needs to hear it too. I will see you next week with a new theme. Take care of yourself. Okay, my friend, that's all I've got for you today. But before you go, 2 quick reminders. Number 1, if we're not already friends on Instagram, let's get connected. You can find me as Leading Yourself Podcast. Number 2, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am incredibly grateful that you're in this journey with me. I want to leave you with one last thought. I want to remind you that you're destined for more and that every step that you take brings you closer to becoming that best version of yourself. Embrace each day as a chance to learn, grow, and chase your dreams. The world needs you to shine brightly, so go out and show up fully and authentically. Take care, and I'll see you next time.